Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. And let me tell you, this time around, you guys sent in a ton of stuff, articles, reports, even some personal notes. It's clear that you all are really staying on top of the cybersecurity stuff, which is good because there's a lot to unpack this month.
A lot to unpack. It's December 2024, and the cybersecurity landscape, it is intense out there.
It feels like every single day brings news of another breach, another vulnerability.
Yeah, and it's not just the quantity, right? It's that the tactics themselves are becoming so much more sophisticated, and the impact is so much broader.
Exactly. I mean, where do we even begin a ransomware attack hitting Sabre? I mean, we're talking about a company that handles travel bookings for who knows how many thousands of businesses.
Huge.
And they're potentially exposing sensitive employee data.
Sensitive data. Yeah.
Or how about a vulnerability in AMD chips that someone can exploit for less than $10 to compromise cloud environments?
It's crazy.
I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. There's a lot to take in, for sure. But maybe let's start with those big breaches you just mentioned.
Yeah.
I think the Sabre attack, that's a prime example of just how interconnected our digital world is.
Absolutely.
I mean, they service such a huge chunk of the travel industry, right? So this isn't just about one company getting hit. It's going to have these ripple effects across, airlines and hotels and travel agencies. And then the data that was stolen, social security numbers, financial info. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that can have long-term consequences.
Absolutely. A stark reminder that even these giant companies can be vulnerable and that the fallout can be massive.
Absolutely.
And then there's that AWS breach, which I thought was interesting because it wasn't a flaw in AWS itself.
Right.
It was how some users had configured their cloud environments.
Yeah. You know what this highlights, I think, is the importance of understanding cloud security best practices.
For sure.
Even if you were not a tech expert.
Right.
These hackers, they used readily available tools to scan for vulnerabilities and then exploited those misconfigurations. And then, boom, they steal credentials. So it's a good reminder that cloud security, it's a shared responsibility. Providers like AWS, they build secure platforms, but users need to make sure that they're configuring them correctly.
So it's not enough to just trust that the cloud provider has everything locked down. You need to be proactive about your own security settings.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got a travel giant hit by ransomware and a reminder to check our cloud configurations. What else is keeping cybersecurity professionals up at night these days?
Well, there's a worrying trend that we're seeing of Japanese firms being increasingly targeted by these attackers.
Really?
Yeah, so Kurita Water Industries and Ito-En, both major players, they were recently hit with ransomware. And, it's hard to say for certain, but it might be partly because Japanese companies have historically been a little bit slower to adopt these really robust cybersecurity measures.
Interesting.
But it also shows, I think, that these attackers are going global and they're finding success in these new markets.
Yeah. And then, we have AppLight.
Oh, yeah.
Which is this malware that's spreading through fake job offers and app downloads.
Yeah, it's like something out of a spy movie, right?
I know.
They're using people's desire for a new job.
Right.
Or a cool new app to try and steal their financial credentials.
It really speaks to the increasing sophistication of social engineering tactics.
It really does.
Attackers aren't just relying on shady links anymore.
Nope.
They're crafting these believable scenarios and leveraging our emotions like excitement about a new job.
Absolutely.
Or, curiosity about an app to trick us into letting our guard down.
Yeah, it preys upon that human element.
It's a good reminder that cybersecurity is as much about human psychology as it is about technology.
Oh, for sure.
And speaking of exploiting vulnerabilities, we've got this case of this Chinese firm, Sichuan Silence, that was sanctioned by the U.S. for targeting critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
Including government agencies.
This one is particularly concerning, I think, because they exploited a known vulnerability.
Yeah. Sophos firewall.
Okay.
And it had been around for a while. And the fact that they were able to use it for so long, it raises questions about vendor responsiveness and really the security posture of critical infrastructure. Like, are patches being applied quickly enough? Are organizations doing enough to proactively hunt for threats and vulnerabilities?
It seems like even when patches are available, there's a lag in getting them implemented.
Yeah.
Which leave the door open for attackers.
It certainly does.
Okay, so we've covered some major breaches, we highlighted some worrying trends, but we've also got a whole stack of reports on specific vulnerabilities to get through. Are you ready to dive into those?
Let's get into the nitty-gritty details. I think some of these are going to surprise you.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and look at some specific vulnerabilities that are making headlines this month. And you flagged this Microsoft NTLM zero-day vulnerability.
Yeah.
NTLM, it's a protocol that's used for authentication in Windows environments. It's basically how your computer verifies who you are.
And a 0-day, that means it's a vulnerability that's been discovered, but there's no patch for it yet.
So it's like a lock that's been found to be faulty, but the locksmith hasn't come up with a fix for it yet.
Exactly. And what makes this particular 0-day worrying is that it allows for credential theft.
Oh.
Meaning these attackers could potentially gain access to your accounts, and get this, it won't be patched until April 2025.
Wow, that's a long time to wait for a fix.
It is.
Especially when it comes to something as critical as authentication.
Right.
So anyone running Windows 7 through 11 is potentially at risk here.
That's right. And this is actually the second NTLM 0-day in recent months, which suggests there might be a pattern of recurring vulnerabilities with this protocol.
Huh. Interesting.
So it really underscores the importance of staying informed about these vulnerabilities and exploring mitigations, even before the patches are available.
Okay, so we need to be extra cautious about our Windows security.
Right.
But you also had this bad RAM vulnerability, which affects AMD chips that are used in cloud environments. And it's unsettling how cheap and easy it is to exploit less than $10.
Yeah, I mean, the bad RAM vulnerability is just another reminder that even the most secure systems can have weaknesses, and those weaknesses can often be exploited with these surprisingly simple tools.
Yeah.
And it really highlights the need for a layered security approach, where we're not just relying on software-based protections.
So like having multiple locks on your door just in case one fails.
Precisely. And in this case, bad RAM can potentially bypass security protections in cloud environments like AWS, Google, Microsoft, which means sensitive data could be at risk.
Yeah, it's not good.
No.
And speaking of Microsoft, you also highlighted their December 2024 Patch Tuesday.
Yes, Microsoft. They released a massive batch of patches this month, addressing 71 vulnerabilities. This includes some critical remote code execution RCE flaws, which could allow attackers to take control of your system.
Wow.
So it's just another reminder that keeping your systems updated is crucial.
71 vulnerabilities. I mean, that's a lot of digital duct tape they're slapping on.
It is a lot.
Makes you wonder how many more are out there just lurking in the shadows.
Yeah, it does make you think. And while we're on the topic of patches, you also flagged a vulnerability in the Clio file transfer tool.
Right.
A previous patch actually failed to fully address the issue, so that leaves many organizations still vulnerable.
So even when a patch is released, it's not always a guaranteed fix.
That's right. It highlights the importance of thorough testing and validation of security updates.
Okay.
Organizations need to have robust incident response plans in place and not just assume that applying a patch is going to solve the problem.
Right.
And speaking of patches, there are some unpatched vulnerabilities that have been around for a while now.
You're talking about those Cisco router and GoCast BGP tool flaws, right?
Yes, 8 months with no fixes in sight.
That's a long time.
It is. And these flaws are particularly concerning because they affect devices that are often deployed in remote or hard-to-reach locations,
Right.
which makes them prime targets for these attackers.
Yeah. And then we've got even more, right? The Avanti Cloud Services appliance.
Right. There's a maximum severity authentication bypass vulnerability, and that one, it's the 6th CSA vulnerability in recent months.
That's a lot.
It's concerning because Avanti's products are used by thousands of companies, and this flaw could allow attackers to gain full control without even needing a password.
Yikes.
Yeah.
And it seems like every week there's a new critical vulnerability popping up.
It does feel that way sometimes.
And you also pointed out a critical vulnerability in SAP NetWeaver, which is a popular enterprise software platform.
Yeah, that one could lead to full system compromise.
Wow.
So it really highlights the need for organizations to prioritize security, especially for enterprise software that handles sensitive data and critical business processes.
For sure. And speaking of critical vulnerabilities that hit closer to home,
Yeah.
you also flag a vulnerability in the WP Forms plugin, which is used on over 6 million WordPress sites.
Yeah, that's a lot of websites potentially at risk.
It is this vulnerability could allow attackers to issue unauthorized refunds and cancel subscriptions. So if you're running a WordPress site, this is definitely something to pay attention to. Make sure you've updated your WP Fumes plugin.
Absolutely. And then there's a vulnerability in Python's Asensio module.
Python.
Right.
But isn't that just for like coding and stuff?
It is, but it's used in all sorts of applications these days. And this particular vulnerability, it could lead to unbounded memory usage and system crashes. So it's just another example of how these vulnerabilities can crop up in unexpected places.
You really have to stay on top of it.
You do. And you also included a couple of reports in your stack, which I think will be interesting to dive into.
Yes. Cloudflare's report, it kind of paints a rather bleak picture of the internet.
Yeah.
They say that 6.5% of global traffic and 4.3% of emails are potentially malicious.
That's a staggering amount of bad stuff floating around out there, and it's not evenly distributed.
Right.
The gambling and gaming sector, along with finance, they're facing the highest attack rates.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Those industries deal with a lot of money and sensitive personal information.
Exactly. And the report also highlights the continued prevalence of Log4j vulnerabilities,
So even when a vulnerability is patched, the threat doesn't necessarily disappear overnight.
That's often the case. Yeah, it seems like we're always playing catch-up with these things.
That really does.
But there is some good news. The report also mentions the rise of post-quantum encryption adoption. As quantum computing advances, there's a growing need for encryption methods that can withstand the power of these new machines.
So we're slowly but surely getting ready for the quantum era.
We are, and it's encouraging to see that adoption is increasing. But in the meantime, there's another worrying trend we need to discuss.
The surge in ransomware attacks that are targeting utility companies.
That's the one, yeah. InfoSecurity magazine reported a 42% increase in such attacks this past year.
That's a lot.
It is, and this is particularly concerning because these companies, they provide essential services like electricity, water, gas. Disruptions to those services can have a devastating impact on communities.
For sure.
Yeah.
So why are utilities becoming such a hot target for cyber criminals?
Well, one reason is that many utilities are still running these older systems that were not designed with security in mind.
Oh, boy.
They also often have a mix of IT and OT operational technology systems,
Right.
which can create vulnerabilities that attackers can exploit. And I imagine the human factor still plays a big role. Spear phishing, I bet, is still a major entry point for these attacks.
Absolutely. The report found that spear phishing was responsible for 81% of true positive alerts in the utility sector.
Wow.
Attackers are getting very good at crafting these targeted emails that trick employees into clicking on malicious links or opening infected attachments.
They are.
It's just a reminder that security awareness training is critical for everyone in an organization.
Yes.
Not just the IT department.
Not just the IT department.
So it's not enough to have the latest technology in place.
Right.
You need to have a culture of security throughout the organization.
Absolutely.
Are there any specific ransomware groups that are particularly focused on utilities?
Well, the Play ransomware group, they've been very active in targeting utilities. In fact, their attacks have increased by a whopping 233% over the past year.
233%. Are you serious?
I know it's a scary thought, and I imagine it's not just random cyber criminals that are going after utilities. What about state-sponsored groups?
You're right. State-sponsored groups like Volt Typhoon have also been observed targeting utilities, and their motivations are often different from those of criminal groups.
Right.
They may be seeking to disrupt services, steal sensitive data, or even gain control of critical infrastructure for strategic purposes.
Exactly. So utilities, they're facing this multifaceted threat from both criminal and state-sponsored actors. And it's not just ransomware,
Right.
Domain impersonation, credential theft, exploiting open ports. These are all common tactics used against utilities.
Right. It's a reminder that cybersecurity is an ongoing battle, and organizations need to be vigilant and proactive to stay ahead of the curve.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right, so we're back, and we've covered a lot of ground here.
I have.
Breaches, vulnerabilities, trends reports, it's a lot to take in.
It is.
But I feel like we're starting to get a clearer picture of the challenges we're facing in the digital world.
Absolutely. And I think the key takeaway here is that cybersecurity, it's everyone's responsibility.
Yeah.
It's not just something that IT departments need to worry about.
Right.
We all have a role to play in protecting ourselves and our organizations.
So true. So true.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk solutions then. What can our listeners and really anyone do to avoid becoming another cybercrime statistic?
Well, the first thing is awareness. Stay informed about the latest threats and vulnerabilities. That means keeping your software up to date, paying attention to those security alerts, and being wary of suspicious emails and websites. Think of it like checking the news,
Right.
But for the digital world,
It's not just about having the best antivirus software.
Right.
It's about being informed and proactive.
Exactly. And just like you lock your doors at night, you need to have strong passwords for your online accounts.
For sure.
Use a unique password for each one, and consider using a password manager to help you keep track of them all.
Okay.
And whenever possible, enable two-factor authentication. It adds that extra layer of security
Right.
that makes it so much harder for attackers to gain access.
Two-factor authentication, that's become pretty standard these days,
Right.
thankfully. But beyond passwords and software updates, what else can people do?
Be mindful of what you share online. Avoid posting sensitive personal information on social media or public forums. Think twice before clicking on links or downloading attachments from unknown sources.
Yeah,
If something seems too good to be true,
it probably is.
it probably is. And if you think you've been compromised, act quickly.
Okay.
Change your passwords, contact your bank or credit card company if you need to, and report the incident to the appropriate authorities.
Better safe than sorry. So to recap, staying safe online is about staying informed, using strong passwords, two-factor authentication, being mindful of what you share, and acting quickly if you suspect a problem.
That's a great summary. And I think it's important to add that cybersecurity, it's a shared responsibility.
Absolutely.
It's not just up to individuals to protect themselves. We need to work together as a society to create a more secure digital ecosystem.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It's about companies taking security seriously, governments enacting sensible regulations,
Yeah.
and all of us doing our part to be more aware and proactive.
Exactly. It's like a neighborhood watch for the digital world.
I love that.
We all need to be looking out for each other.
That's so true. Well said.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this cybersecurity deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a thought. We've seen that the threats are real and they're constantly evolving.
Yeah.
But we've also seen that there are things we can do to protect ourselves.
Absolutely.
It's about taking that knowledge and turning it into action.
I agree, and I'd encourage everyone to think about their own digital habits and security practices. What steps can you take today to make yourself a harder target? Even small changes can make a big difference.
So true. So true. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of cybersecurity. Stay vigilant, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.